stop me. I'm all the way up. All the way up. I'm all the way up. I'm all the way up.
Good morning, Vietnam.
Nice.
I'm Meyer Dalal, your host of the Money Matrix podcast, where smart money finds a smarter way.
That's catchy. I like that.
I like it too.
Yeah. I'm Alan Hastings, co-host, and today we're going to be talking about
Different markets. And a lot of people ask us, where do you invest? Where should we invest? What do you think about? What do you look for when you're looking at an investment property? I mean, for me, there's a couple of factors that I look at personally, and I'm sure a lot of investors probably follow the same suit. You're looking at capital appreciation and you're looking at cash flow. And ideally, if you can catch a market that has both, it's a win-win situation. And, you know, a couple of factors that are important for me that I think a lot of investors should consider when they're investing is, why are people going there? What's the desirability about Florida or wherever it may be? You know, and population growth obviously is very important, and job growth, and just the fact, is it a good place to live? You know, what's the political climate? What's the economic conditions? Would I want to live there? And that's really what I base my investment strategies on. And personally, I don't like to invest in things that are too far from me where I can't go and check and touch it and feel it if there's a problem. That's my personal. What are your thoughts on that, Alan?
So I think you broke it down to two main categories there. One is capital appreciation for equity growth. Year over year, is your house making money? Is it growing in value? Number two was rental yield, right? Is it worth putting in the effort? Are you making enough on the rent to not only cover the mortgage, but make a little bit of profit? And I think that's, like you're saying, there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's kind of, you pick one most of the time. I wouldn't say that you can't have both, but I think that you should go into deciding where you're trying to invest with one of those goals in mind. Do you have a specific favorite?
I mean, listen, for me, we got lucky, but for example, I'll give you an investment strategy that my son, Daniel, he was just entering into University of Miami. This is now going 4 years ago. He's graduating, God willing, in May. So he kept pushing me. He's like, Dad, listen, it doesn't make sense to pay $50,000, $60,000 a year plus the housing. You know, we'd be probably spending about $100,000 a year in all in between tuition and room and board. He's like, let's find the property near the school, and then, you know, let's see what happens and how we can rent it. And he started, I said to him, okay, listen, this is a project for you. Mind you, he was 17. He was working in the bank. It was during COVID. And I said to him, this is your project. So if you want this, you're going to find the property. You're going to do the research. You're going to reach out to the realtors. You're going to do the legwork, because I wanted him to understand what's involved. And he came in and said, okay, we can't be in Coral Gables because it's just too expensive, property taxes, but let's go right over the border and let's see what was there. And all along, I made him provide me the why, the analytics behind it, the reasoning behind it, and the rationale. It wasn't just, hey, I came up with this. So it was a documented effort for him to really understand. And we ended up investing at that time, which was the wrong side of town, 1 block out of Coral Gables, which now is way the right side of town. And we picked up a single family home that had 2 separate units, one with 3 bedrooms and one with 4 bedrooms. And he got in and he put a couple of friends in with him, and they shared the 3-bedroom house. And then the demand just exploded because University of Miami said basically, hey, we're knocking down one of our main towers. And there was a huge housing shortage for students. And I think that's really something that I look for, is big college towns that have a shortage, that have a need, that are, you know, attract a certain type of student, if you will. I mean, if you check it up right now, I bet you probably Austin is up there, Michigan is up there, you know, by University of Michigan. I bet you Florida is there for sure, University of Miami. You have a lot of these college towns that are huge and attract big type of markets where the rentals there. I mean, that's something that I really look for, is that type of stuff. And I know you did some research on this. What did your research find out when you were started to look?
Yeah, I actually was interested as well in what makes a property value go up. Like, I know that sounds a little simple, but there's a lot of fundamentals to that, right? And a lot of the things that you're saying tie into these very basic principles. One of them being supply. Generally, those college towns, I mean, they bring in students and then they spit out, young professionals who have income, but now they're looking for a place to buy. And I know, for instance, Zillow recently did a hottest markets list, right? And if you look at the top 3 of their markets, they're college towns, and it's primarily in the Northeast, because those kids come out of school and they've got income, they've just got their first job, and they're looking to start a home base and nest, whatever. And I think that the number 1 on the list was a city. Hold on a second. I think this city was actually producing. It was something like 2 jobs per home per year, if that makes
Wow.
sense. So the idea is that the need for the homes is so high because it's spitting out people who need homes at a higher rate than it's making homes.
I mean, I know Gainesville is definitely up there as probably the
100%.
top, if it's not the top. I mean, University of Florida at one point was considered a party school, whatever. But now, because of, I think, COVID and all the people wanting to move down to Florida, UF is one of the hardest schools to get into in the country. And they have such a severe shortage that, any type of housing in and around Gainesville is a home run, in my opinion. I think you're going to get the capital appreciation, and you're definitely going to get the demand for that rental. And renting by room is so common there. I mean, my son's girlfriend here in Miami, she rents a place with a couple of girlfriends, and it's a high-end building within Miami's campus. They're spending a ton of money just for a bedroom. I mean, it's crazy, the numbers that you see there. So if you can take it from and put on your investor hat and say, hey, let me look at this and let me see what type of opportunities there are and make sense of it. I mean, and on the short-term rental markets, Florida is definitely up there. And I know there's a couple other places that really stand out when you did that research again. And it's not the cities you would think.
Right.
It was one of them was, what was it called? Harris City or something like that?
Yeah, in the center of Florida. You're talking
Yeah,
about
in the
Haines.
Haines City. I have
Yeah.
no idea where it is. This is the first time I've even heard of it, but I imagined it would be Miami, Fort Lauderdale,
Right.
those type of places. But it weren't even in the top 10. They were more inner, like Deerfield Beach, which is a little bit of a beach town. But in general, it wasn't the common cities that you're thinking about. And I think that's something that people should really think about too.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be the main, Austin and Dallas, even though they're top markets there. But I think if you can find a little bit on the outskirts,
Kind of out of the way.
correct, because then it becomes even more affordable, and that's when your cash flow really increases.
I think when I looked up Haines, it was primarily because of its proximity to 2 different things. One, you're not so far from Tampa, and a couple of the markets that were kind of booming were around major cities, not in the major city, but it was also near Disney World. And it's one of those things where you may not think, that's a memorable name, Haines or whatever, but it's about proximity as much as it is about recognizability. You're not going to see people buying a ton of homes in Miami expecting to, make this kind of cash flow, short term especially, but you'd see cities outside of Miami start to grow because Miami is such a booming area that the
Yeah.
surrounding region also benefits.
It's funny you say that. Orlando, Kissimmee,
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge, huge influx of building and growth, and Sanford, all around that area. Again, it's around Disney World and that whole thing. And there's such a draw still for people that love that whole concept. I mean, I had a friend of mine who bought a house. It was like a 12-bedroom house. And he brought in an artist and spent $10,000 to customize each room as a theme, a Disney theme. Every room was different. And I said to him, what are you doing? He said, I promise you, this is, and he's packed all the time. I mean, he does short-term rentals and he's packed all the time because he's known for the Toy Story room and for this
I
room.
think I've seen this online. Like, I think I know what you're talking about.
It's crazy. I mean, the guy legitimately has such foresight to think of. I'm not that creative. My wife is the creative one, but literally for me, I said to him, why this? Why, but he picked staple stuff like Star Wars room and this. Is there Star Wars in Disney?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Star Wars, one of the bigger rides. So whatever the bigger type of attraction rides and whatnot there were, that's what he focused in on. And that's what the type of stuff that he drove on and drove and drove and drove. And that's all he markets now is the theme rooms and the different types of amenities that you get with that. And then obviously he's got the pool and everything. But if you think about it, it's much cheaper than staying at Disney.
Yes, 100%.
I mean, just a night in Disney plus the food plus everything will cost you $600-700 easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Well, another note that I had, kind of a shock, was back in 23-24. I know you were heavily invested in this too. The Florida market was taking off. Texas was taking off. A lot of the like coastal towns and southern regions where property values hadn't yet caught up. They were still low. Now, after those like 2, maybe 3 years of explosive home buying, right? Where I know you got in your portfolio, a lot of South Florida as well was important to you. Those cities are less about rental yield now, and they're more about property values going up.
Sure.
Because I saw, we did a lot of research into the top cities in Florida for appreciation of home values. And those were cities like Miami, Orlando, Jacksonville. It seems like
Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, 100%. It seems like you got in when it was about rental yields and you were making good, margins. But now when that's cooled off a little, your properties are jumping in value.
Yeah. I mean, I had this conversation last night. We had some family over and, I live in Boca Raton, and Boca Raton was considered the sleepy town, the old person, it was for older people.
Retirement.
It wasn't retirement. It wasn't
Right.
for younger people. And, if you look at the yield in terms of property value growth in Boca going back 25 years, it incrementally increased a little bit. And during COVID, it exponentially boomed.
Right.
And people in my area, just in general in Boca, they've hit a jackpot because it was a lot of people who own homes for 30, 40 years, 50 years that are pretty much paid off in cash because they bought them cheap and they're sitting on a ton of money. And what's happening in my neighborhood is as each of those people decide to downsize or move on or whatever, they end up selling and people come in, rehab, do whatever, and build these gorgeous homes and remodel them and update them. And you see developments completely changing and turning over because there's so much of that happening. And if you get a chance and fortunate enough to find those type of properties and something that we're starting to really look at heavily is in Orlando and Kissimmee and Sanford area, because there's a lot of minority groups that are going in there and building it up. Like there's Hispanic community, especially the ones of faith, religious organizations
Sure.
and whatnot. It's expanding tremendously, creating jobs. There's opportunities there. There's so much there that we're lending money to faith-based organizations that are expanding and went from 100, 200 person church in a matter of 3 years to have 1,000 members, and they're bursting at the seams. They have to have 3 different staggered, masses, if you will. And it's just unbelievable what we see here. But even not just Florida, because I'm in Florida, but you're seeing that in Texas. You're seeing that in Arizona, North Carolina. I mean, you see cities there that, so for example, I searched the top cities that are booming in appreciation and also rental yield.
Yeah.
Austin's cooled off a little bit because it expanded so fast, and there's,
Right.
but and then there's Dallas, and then there's Houston and San Antonio. Now, if you look at all of these states, jobs are going there. That's one of the biggest factors.
I
Job
agree.
growth. Jobs are flooding there. People are leaving. And then if you look at the states that are losing, I mean, this is a little bit older data, 23, 24 data. But California, New York, Illinois are amongst the top states that are losing people regularly. And unfortunately, it's because the jobs are leaving. Once the jobs
Right.
leave, the people follow too, because they want to make sure they have the job stability and they have the opportunity.
100%. I think it's also affordability as well. And supply is a big driving factor in that. I know in Texas, There were reports that those markets are cooling off, and I think a lot of that is because they may have overbuilt. There was a lot of developments in Texas where, I mean, they almost look like ghost towns. They were just like spans of houses that were priced during the boom where people were trying to turn a really big buck. And then it turns out, the demand wasn't all there yet. Whereas you don't see that as much in the Carolinas, for instance, where the demand matches the supply. The demand is super high there and the supply is not, outpace that. So the demand and the supply are high. And then in Florida, it's a similar situation where the demand is still high, but the supply is less so, right? Like there's that value in your house is going up because there's not many more houses being built comparatively.
It's interesting though. Now the supply in St. Pete's and that whole area is definitely on the higher end amount of what's happening. So I'm curious to see what happens with that whole thing. Do we see it dry up? There's got to be some reasons why what's happening here. I mean, maybe people are scared they're going to pull their properties off. You never know, because right now that whole unknown is, are we going to see inflation? Are we going to see job loss?
Right.
I mean, you have all these Fed governors now talking about inflation's going to hit 5%, unemployment rate's going to hit 4.5% to 5%, and you have a slow growth in the market. I mean, that's stagflation right there. I mean, that's what it is. But I don't see it happening. But again, you don't know. But throughout all of this, there's still opportunity.
100%.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And again, qualifying wise, there's also an art to doing that where you can get in on a home and make it cash flow and make it work for yourself. And it's important to know what you're looking at, what you're looking for, and also have the right team to support you.
Yeah. I think one of the big things that I'm kind of curious about as well is with a lot of the loans, that we do for, expanding investors and people who are taking advantage at the moment of, this opportunity before things get a little different, especially because we don't know what the numbers for April are going to look like for inflation, things like that. How are you looking at a property in these markets where the yield may not be so high and qualifying for the cash flow? Like, what are your tricks?
I mean, at the end of the day, right now, when I look at a property, if the yield is not there, meaning the rental cash flow, and it's more of a break even,
right,
then that appreciation has to be there. So I can forego the upfront money because rates are a little bit higher, cost of financing is a little bit higher. So it's a mathematical equation, right? You're looking at a property and you're saying, okay, I'm going to be in this for the next 2 to 3 years. And hopefully, God willing, rates will come down enough where I can refinance and my cash flow will even out with the appreciation.
And you'll just get the best of both.
And just get the best of both worlds. But at the very least, I have to have one. I can't not have. And I'm more of an appreciation person and I care less about the cash flow.
Long term.
And me personally, everything I do is interest-only loans. That's just a personal preference for me. And why I do that is because it's all about cash flow, all about making a deal work and the numbers work. Because I know I'll never be in a mortgage where I'm going to make 360 payments and pay off a mortgage.
Right.
I'm going to pay down the mortgage as money comes in. And the beauty of an interest-only loan is if you pay down $100,000, let's just say on your loan, your payment now is based off of the lower balance.
So you paying down that loan means it's recasting
to the lower balance. So now your monthly payment becomes lower. Now, if you take that same $100,000 on a 30-year fixed mortgage, you're going to pay off the home faster, but your payment still stays the same.
Right.
You don't gain the benefit of the lower balance.
So you could get into a home with 25% down, maybe a year goes by, you're in a better position, you pay down that loan, and then all of a sudden the home that you got into, as a break-even cash flow is now netting positive because your recasted payment is lower.
Exactly.
Got it.
And that's my investment strategies. Interest-only loans, pay down when I can, if I can, chunks of it. And that's what I do. And now the homes that I have good cash flow on, I'll just put that back towards the principal because the way our loans are structured, you can pay up to 19% a year without any penalty.
On an investment.
On an investment property with a prepayment penalty, you can pay up to 19% a year without any penalty. So I just put back that extra money and just pay down the balance accordingly that way. So there are different strategies to employ to gain the net same result. But the key is, everyone says location, location, location. It really is. I mean, it sounds funny when people say, "Oh, it's all about the location," but it's really not about the sell. It's the buy price. It's when you get in, how you get in, and how you structure the deal. That's the most important thing.
Wow. Well, thank you for the insight. I think that, at least I have a better picture after today of where I should be looking, because I think, it surprised me a little bit that certain markets that we've all kind of taken for granted as, Florida may be the property appreciation number one, but maybe not the yield number one anymore. It's important if you have that strategy to really think about where you're going. But
and then you can find other markets that aren't as expensive.
right.
That's key too. Trying to get in where your out of pocket money going into it isn't as expensive. So you'll have other markets, for example, here in Texas, you have some of the outskirts like San Antonio isn't as expensive as a Dallas or a Houston or something. And like, for example, Arizona, you have Phoenix and Scottsdale. Yes, they've gone up in price too, but there's a lot of affordability there. Their property taxes are very low.
Right.
Very low. And their cost of homeowners insurance also isn't that high either. So the property price may be a little bit higher, but it offsets because of the taxes and the insurance. Where in Florida, for example, certain areas, your homeowners insurance are high, your property taxes. I personally don't invest in Miami because of that.
Right.
Property taxes are super high, and so are the homeowners insurance figures. I prefer Palm Beach County. I think Palm Beach County, if you were going to invest in Southern Florida, I think Palm Beach County is the best place to invest in. There's a lot of pockets where you can pick up properties. Taxes aren't super high. Homeowners insurance isn't a killer, and you're not paying through the nose for Miami
Right.
appeal and aura.
If I had a question to ask for that, now you mentioned short-term rentals and long-term rentals. I know that in college towns, you would be kind of looking at it as a longer-term rental because, there's students there for years at a time or
Well, it's a
potentially
quasi,
year.
it's a both,
Got it.
because you're really going semester to semester. Not
Right.
everyone will say, yeah, I'm going to take 1 year straight,
Yeah.
because it's really a 10-month thing. First of all, it's like almost 2 5-month rentals blocks, if you will. And you have a lot of students that go abroad. You have things of that nature. So the student housing that we have is all furnished, basic amenities. They have a desk, they have a bed. The bathroom is nice. There's a kitchen. It's furnished properly, nicely. And so, for example, the summertime we'll rent to, graduate students and whatnot that are there that need to do. And then during spring and winter, we have a group. And then, there are times where people will go abroad and they'll say, okay, I have a friend of mine who wants to come in, and then I'll come back in on the other side. So the student housing is a quasi short-term, long-term. We have some
flexible.
stuff. Yeah, you have to be flexible. You have to understand it. And again, my son manages that because that's part of his understanding of how business works and how, what the numbers are and how to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And then we have our short-term rentals and the keys that, like I'd mentioned in the last podcast, we're selective with who we bring in and the numbers. So I don't need to be at a 85, 90% occupancy. I'd rather be a little less, but bring in a little bit more money and the quality of the person.
Right. It averages out.
And then I have just longer term, year leases that just sit there, and they just, a lot of my tenants renew. It's very easy, simple. I'm a fair person. For me, it's just, I don't overcharge, and I'm
Right.
not the cheapest, but I'm fair.
Right.
And that's the most important thing.
That's how you build consistency for sure with your tenants, right?
Yeah, as a landlord, especially on long-term leases, I lay down the rules up front, but I'm very fair. Anything that needs gets repaired, it gets repaired immediately. There's no delays, there's no issues, there's no questions.
Right.
If it's legitimately something's wrong, immediately it gets sent out. I have a crew, AC people, electrical people, plumbing people. They're all within, you build time, you build a Rolodex of people who you have that you can depend on and count on. And that's important as a landlord. You need that type of stuff. And then on the short-term rentals, the property manager is the key. You have to have good property managers. Otherwise, it's a disaster. And the ones that have established cleaning companies and everything, like I don't have the time to personally manage or do that. It's just not my thing. So those are the two things that are super valuable. You know, if you're long term, be consistent, be fair, quick up on the uptake on the repairs, and on the short term, get a good property management company and just do the right thing.
So it sounds like when you choose between a long term and a short term, the short term, you have somebody managing most of the work for you, but that's an added cost.
Yeah,
So it's really got to make sense for you to take on the short term.
of course.
Got it. So that's not your first thing you look for. You prioritize long term, or is it, you know?
I prioritize long term.
Got it.
Short term right now is an expensive proposition.
Yep.
When we bought our properties, we bought for capital appreciation, and the short term went along with it.
Yeah.
But I don't look for short-term rental specific homes because I don't have the patience to self-manage and to deal with it. And then it becomes a cost. It's a cost of doing business, and it's a factor of what it is. And then there's a big upfront cost. You have to furnish it.
Right.
You have to really, and all of our homes are luxury. So it has to be
To a
a
standard.
certain standard, you know, so I won't just do anything. So that's also a big upfront number that I have to end up recouping over a period of time. So right now, my priority is truly the student housing model.
Yeah.
We're actively looking in Gainesville right now. We're actively looking in, you know, near University of Miami. I just prefer to be, if I had someone that I could trust and depend that would be able to go to, for example, you know, like your schools in Austin and Texas. Not as much Colorado. I don't like the politics that goes behind there in
Sure.
terms of landlord and whatnot. But Michigan too is a great school, great opportunity, and typically the level of student that goes there and who goes there also I look at too. You know, and these are things, the factors that are super important, especially when you look at who's going to be signing on the lease. You know, the kids don't sign, the parents sign.
Right.
And, you know, you're going to rent to responsible people with parents that actually know what it is and understand if you default on the lease, what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very important. You have to do your due diligence. You have to ask the right questions, and it's your home. So you don't have to rent to anyone. It's up to you. You have certain parameters and certain guidelines that you lay down, and that's it. And that's really important,
I was
is
gonna ask,
understanding.
now that you're focused more on that student housing situation, what do you think about, you know, the economic news with tariffs and potential inflation, right? If inflation kicks up, I would expect the short-term rental market to take a hit, because generally those are vacation trips. You know, I'm going with my family, for instance, to Disney World, and maybe I can't stay in the Star Wars room this year because, you know, we got a little more credit card debt or whatever it may be. Coming up this next year, do you expect any inflation of those factors, of anything, to impact student housing at all? Is that something that is?
I don't think it'll impact student housing.
Not at all.
I don't think so at all, because students are going to go there. Kids are going to go to school regardless. I mean, the amount of, right now, my cousin's daughter applied to UF, so I can speak on that. Just from her town, they had 350 applicants just from that town.
Wow.
Out of state, from New York to Florida. And the acceptance rate, they accepted 2 students,
Wow.
my cousin's daughter and her friend.
That's ridiculous.
And so there's such a demand for these types of schools. In Maryland too, University of Maryland, super hard to get into. Michigan, super hard to get into. Texas, Miami, you know, you have a lot of schools throughout the country in markets that I want to be in.
Yeah.
That are landlord friendly, that are pro money, jobs, growth, etc. That's what I look for. So, you know, coupled with the fact that there's student demand, I know there's job growth, I know there's stability in the market, I know there's good politics.
Yeah.
So I'm not just following one trend.
Yeah.
I look for multiple to make sure I'm secure.
And do you have a long-term plan? Like if those don't, you know, say for instance, this does affect, if it did, you know, education rates, whatever, is there a long-term play in these houses as well? I mean, they're still in good cities,
Sure.
right?
I mean,
Like
they're in good locations where the job growth is there. So there is that demand. So I'm not renting per room. I'll rent.
You can transition.
I can transition.
Yeah,
Correct.
having an escape plan is
Yeah. And we're really not renting per room. It's 3 people that go on are renting the whole place.
Like a
and
single
then
lease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so they each sign on the lease. So it's not like a per thing. It's one master lease with each individual that signs on there.
easy
So,
transition if
yeah,
you need it.
exactly. So it's an easy long-term lease to a long-term lease.
So I guess this is kind of a tricky question. You predicted a little bit the Florida housing boom. I mean, you took advantage of that during COVID mostly and prior. Is there another market other than Florida that you think is like next on the upswing?
I really like the Carolinas, North Carolina specifically. I really like, there's a lot of opportunity there. Prices are still strong. There's a lot of opportunity in that area. Arizona has certain pockets that I think are good. For me, Texas is okay. I don't love it. Tennessee too has a lot of opportunities.
Tennessee, that's interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't jump into like Nashville, but there are other areas that are quality, like destination places, and people go there and visit, and you know that it's not just single faceted. You know, you have a lot of people that drive through there and go there.
I think, you know, the Carolinas, I mean, that's been a hotspot for short-term rentals for a long time. Like I did a deal probably 2 years ago with this investment group, and they built out, I think, 6 or 7 properties within just like 2 blocks. And they're 12 rooms on the waterfronts, and they just do short-term rentals. They were pocketing like a net profit of $5,000-6,000 per house per month. It was unbelievable. And now I see more long-term rental stuff there. Do you know why that transition might be happening?
I mean, listen, just like any market, you know, there's when after COVID, you had an influx of money. Everyone had money. So it's easy to go spend that kind of money and to do what it is and to take advantage of those types of areas. Now money is not flowing as freely. People are more considerate of what there is. So as a landlord, you have to pivot and you have to shift and do whatever it takes. You'd rather make some money than no money.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, is being amenable, being malleable enough to understand, hey, not every market is going to stay the same forever.
Right.
And you have to be able to understand, have a little bit of foresight to say, hey, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, we're always looking, my wife and I, at what's happening in the market, what's happening in the news, what's happening in the relevant, you know, world, local, you know, government, all across the board, to see what opportunities there exist, but also what are the pitfalls? Where can we fall down? Where can we get trapped?
Right.
And that's how. And we talk to our kids about this too, and we talk to them and say, hey, listen, you know, this is what it is. And it's funny, this weekend, one of my younger kids, she's 11. She got so mad at me. She's like, Dad, I don't understand why I can't be the manager of the company. Why is it my older son, Daniel? I'm like, honey, you're 11. You can't go, you're on the corporation as a member, but you can't be the manager. She's like, you wait, I'm going to be the best manager there is. And like, you know, so we talk about this at an early age, and we talk to our kids and tell them, listen, this is how we do things. This is what it is. And I think it's so important to talk to your kids about this, to talk about finances and life and how much things cost. And you know, I walk around the whole time telling them, turn off the lights. I don't own the electric company. You know, now it's a running joke in my home, but it's true. Because if you are haphazard and your kids don't know what it is and you just shield them from everything, when they grow up, it's going to be a kick in the teeth. They don't know what it is and what it costs and what life costs. And you guys are going through it now.
Yeah.
You know, it's a shock every time you look at it. You're trying to get a new car or a new home or whatever. And and the challenges that come along with that. And you're in the business and you have to navigate, okay, I got to navigate my credit score. It's got to fit this mold and do this way and how to do it. And same thing.
Yeah.
If you didn't have that education.
That's critical. It's really critical. There's those things where, you know, before I was in the industry, I didn't even think about, you know, I've owned, you know, cars. I've had the experience renting on, you know, I've been on both sides. Right. And now that I'm in the industry, like, had I had an education 15 years ago on any of this stuff. I feel like I could have set myself up so much better. You know what I mean? And it's critical to teach them at a young age. I completely agree with that. And it shows, you know, you're definitely of the long-term mindset. That's for sure.
You have to. Well, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope everyone found this helpful. Please watch, listen, learn, like, share, tell your friends about it. And we're here to always help.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.